Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I was reading through the comments from the last couple videos to try to find a video topic to talk about that had something to do with recovery, when I came along this comment, and the comment said, "Can you do a video about finding a sponsor? Currently struggling with this. I'm not sure who to ask, and I'm also avoiding it a lot because I'm scared of doing the steps." And I thought that there was just, first of all, I think the question is a great question. And second of all, I thought that there was just so much honesty in this comment about not wanting to get a sponsor because you don't want to do the steps. And if you get a sponsor, you know a sponsor is going to push you to do the steps. So before I get into this video, I just want to say, like I say in talking about my recovery, that I am not a representative of any 12-step program. I am just sharing my experience, strength, and hope as it comes to any of these topics that I talk about. So just because I say something and it's my experience doesn't mean that somebody else in a 12-step program wouldn't have a completely different experience. I'm not really sure, and I'll probably by the end of this, I will have a more definitive answer. I'm not really sure how many sponsors I have had total in my sobriety. I think it's like 5 or 6, but we'll get to that in just a second. So if you don't know what a sponsor is somebody this is what was taught to me. And if you're in a 12-step program, there are pamphlets that talk about sponsorship and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And they are just suggestions. You don't have to follow them, but it is highly suggested that you follow these things. A sponsor is somebody that has a working knowledge of a 12-step program. This is what was taught to me. A working knowledge of a 12-step program that has a year or more clean time, sobriety time, that has a sponsor themselves, so they are sponsorable, that has a home group, is working steps, and is of service to others. Those are the things that were taught to me. I was also taught that men sponsor men and women sponsor women. And the reason I was taught that really had nothing to do with sexuality or anything like that. It had to do with gender-specific issues that might come up within sponsorship. So there are certain things that if I were sponsoring a woman, that I just would have no knowledge on whatsoever as a man, if that makes sense. And in fact, as many of you know, I have a female sponsor, and she knows that I have men in the program that I go to for outside issues and talking to things and, you know, whatever. And she had told me when I first asked her to sponsor me, and she went to her sponsor and asked, you know, what do you think? Do you think this is okay and whatnot? And her response to me was, if you were in early recovery, I probably wouldn't sponsor you. Although I will tell you that the pamphlets on sponsorship and recovery do say that it is appropriate for a woman to sponsor a gay man and a man to sponsor a lesbian. So, and that's really as far as it goes in talking about sexual orientation within the pamphlets. It doesn't really talk about much further than that. So I always, just in my recovery, I wanted to do things by the book. I wanted to do things the way that I was taught. And so up until 6 or 7 years ago, I had a male sponsor. Not the same sponsor, but several male sponsors. The first sponsor that I had was a guy that I got when I was in treatment, that my counselor in treatment introduced me to, because I had to have a sponsor before I got out of treatment. And so she gave me his name and his number and said, okay, I want you to call this guy and I want you to meet up with him. And he's going to come in here and then, you know, he'll take you to meetings and things like that. And I was like, okay. So I didn't know anything about him, right? And, you know, I will say this. Back in the old days, and this might still be the case at many meetings or certain areas around the world, I don't know. I don't find it to be as true in like my home group or meetings that I go to. But back in the day, you know, like if somebody came in, like if a woman came in, my friend Tanya Jean is very honest about her sobriety on my YouTube channels and has given me permission to talk about her sobriety. And she's even talked about her sobriety in my videos. So, but like if a woman came in, you know, to a meeting and said something that, I don't know, like their story was similar to Tanya's or whatever, you know, other people might say, hey, let me introduce you to Tanya. She would be a great sponsor for you, okay? That doesn't happen as much as I used to see back in the day. So, you know, you don't really see people getting paired up with that many people. I was also often taught that when you are drowning, okay, and you are reaching out for help, you do not look at the person that is standing behind the hand, meaning that you really just want somebody to help you walk the step of recovery, through the steps of recovery with you. This is not a person that's going to be your marriage counselor. This is not a person that's going to be your best friend. This is not a person that you're going to have a social life with. If those things happen over time, that you become friends with them or you become social with them or whatever, that's fantastic. But that is not the role of a sponsor. The role of a sponsor is, did I just say social worker a little bit ago? I meant sponsor. The role of maybe I didn't, I don't know. The role of a sponsor is to literally work you through the steps, okay? The 12 steps as defined by 12-step programs. So I got this sponsor when I was in treatment, and he came in and he met me, and then he said, we'll meet up and we'll go to meetings afterwards and stuff like that. And so we did, and I would say for like the first, I don't know, month or two, he was my sponsor, and we would go to meetings together, and we really just did not connect. He wasn't taking me through the steps. He wasn't asking me anything about the steps. He wasn't really, there was nothing about the steps that, he was bringing up to me. Not only that, but like, there were a lot of things, there's funny stories behind this that I really don't want to get into today, but like, he would share things with me, and, like whenever we would like go out to dinner or whatever, there were always kind of like these funny stories that were like, this girl that I'm dating that lives in Idaho and whatever, and I'm like, I don't understand why he's telling me these stories, like it doesn't really matter to me, you know what I mean, like, and he was a very nice guy, and I've actually seen him around since, and we're always like, hey, how are you? And he's like, I'm so happy that you're still sober. He's a fantastic guy. We just didn't really connect. We didn't really have anything in common whatsoever. And I do think you have to kind of speak the same language to some degree. So that was my first sponsor, and then I started volunteering at the treatment program that I ended up working at, and this woman that I worked with, I had already been going to meetings. And the 12-step program that I'm part of today is not the 12-step program that I got sober in. And I was going to meetings. My home group meeting at that time, her husband was in that program and went to that meeting. And so I knew him from that meeting, and I loved him, and he was funny and goofy and just, I don't know, there was an honesty about him that I absolutely adored. And I just loved that they had met in recovery, and she just had this really cool story. And, she had, anyway, they had a really cool story. And I loved everything about them as just a couple, and they had all these kids that would run around their house and whatever. And actually, there's a funny story about that in a second. But so we were sitting in a meeting, and the conversation, or the topic of the meeting, was balance. And it came to me, and, I shared like, I have really good balance in my life, and I balance this, and I balance that, and whatever. And at that time, and I would encourage anybody in a 12-step program not to do this, most of what I shared were things that I thought sounded good, because I wanted you to like me. You're wasting your time sharing what is good, okay? Tell on yourself, tell your truth, live out loud. Those would be the things that I would recommend. If you're going to go to meetings and you're going to share what is inside of your soul. I bawl my eyes out in meetings. I get angry. I get mad. I share what is going on with me today, That's how I live in recovery. So it came to him, and he goes, I have no balance in my life today. He goes, I wish I did. He was like, but I don't have any balance with my family and my job and all this kind of stuff. And I just was like, oh my God, I want that honesty. Like, that honesty was so attractive to me. Like, I wanted that so bad. And so I asked him to be my sponsor, and he agreed. And so we began working the steps together. And he was the man that took me through my original 4th step, which is a searching and fearless moral inventory of your life. And you make a list of your resentments, your fears, and your conduct. And what happened was, it was that Christmas, and in there, I want to also say, I had, I think, 2 relationships that the first one was right when I got out of treatment, but anyway, that went into him sponsoring me, and he didn't agree with these relationships because it is encouraged in early recovery that you give yourself a year before being in a relationship, because you really don't have anything to give, number one, and number two, it's time for you to work on yourself. And so finally, after the second relationship ended horribly, and he said, okay, are you ready to do it my way? So when we came up on doing the 4-step, I think he assigned, and I did it really late my first year. Like a lot of people do it like month 1, out of, working their steps. And I like really pushing, like I was like, I don't want to do the steps. And he was like, okay. I'm not going to force you to do them. It's on you, And then it was like October, and I still hadn't done the steps. And he goes, we're going to set a date. And I said, okay. And he set, I was back in school by that point, and he had set the date of Christmas, like holiday break. And I was terrified to do it. I mean, I did my whole 4-step in code because I was afraid if anybody found it, I didn't want them to know like who I was talking about, which is so stupid, right? And so he was like, I can remember it was like after Thanksgiving. I mean, I had like a whole month to work on this thing, which in all honesty, it literally takes you a couple hours to do a 4-step. The last 4-step that I did, which took me and my sponsor 2 entire days, 9 hours each to go over, I literally sat at my computer over there and I wrote out in an hour. That's how long it should take you to do it. You know everything that needs to go in your 4-step. I kept on pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And he said to me, I'll never forget this phone call. I can see myself in my bedroom in my apartment back then. He said, it was like the 23rd of December, I think we were doing it on. And he said, we're either going to do your inventory, 5th step is when you share it with your sponsor. He said, we're going to either do your 5th step on the 23rd or you're going to find another sponsor. And the truth of the matter was that my fear of getting another sponsor was greater than doing a 4-step. So I did it. Now, my mom had this experience with her sponsor where she did this 5th step and they went to this flowing well in Carmel, and it was beautiful, and she gave her this rock that said Serenity, and they had this picnic, and it was very, peaceful and all this kind of stuff. Mine was in, and so I was expecting that, okay? Mine was in the basement of my sponsor's house, and his kids literally ran back and forth, and his wife was like, y'all want some Kentucky Fried Chicken? And she was like shouting down and all this kind of stuff. So that was my experience doing my 4th and 5th step. And then, so then after that, they were having marital and relationship problems, and I think it was my 4-year birthday. He had promised me that he was gonna like bring me a cake and a coin and stuff to my birthday, and so anyway, I went to this meeting several weeks in a row, and people weren't showing up to the meeting, and then the final time that I showed up, which was my birthday, nobody came, and he didn't come either. And it was at a treatment facility, not the one I worked at. It was a different facility. It was at Charter Hospital in Indianapolis. And so I went out to the secretary and I took the binder. I actually opened the meeting, and I went through the entire opening of the meeting, through all the coins, 30, 60, 90, 6 months, whatever, on multiples of years. And I said, I have 4 years, and I took a coin. And then I said, does anybody have any topics for burning desires? I closed the meeting, and I walked out to the secretary, and I said, I'm not coming back to this meeting. And at that time, I didn't know how to close down a meeting. Today I do, so I would do it in a completely different way today of how you do that. You take a vote and all this kind of stuff, and you try to get memberships of people to come and things like that. So I would do it in a completely different way today. I didn't know that at 4 years. And I lost touch with him. He didn't respond to me when I would call him, and I found out later that he had died of a heroin overdose. And that was really probably one of the very first ones that was like the hardest for me, because he had helped me so much. Like, he was literally the man that like, he saved my life, And it breaks my heart that what he taught me, he couldn't utilize himself. The next sponsor that I got, was a guy that was absolutely fantastic, and that by that point I was running around with like my friend Tanya and a bunch of our friends, and so I got this guy that was my sponsor for a little while, and he lived on the south side and I lived on the north side, so it made it really difficult, and he was actually I had 2 sponsors that died in the last year, sober, both of them. And he was one of them. And he had 2 years longer than me. So he would have had 30 years this year. And he died of lung cancer last year. And he was my sponsor for about 2 years. And he's the one that really, really helped me work on my relationship with my parents. My next sponsor was the man that taught me to be, so where are we at now? Treatment, Okay, so the next guy that sponsored me is the guy that taught me to be a person of character. When I would walk into meetings, I would have my eyes on the ground, and he would say, when you walk into a room, you hold your head up high because you are a person of character today. He was the person that was my sponsor the longest. He sponsored me through my mother's death. He sponsored me through many breakups. He sponsored me through many changes in my life. He was the wisest person I think I've ever known. And if you met him, he could be the angriest SOB in the world. But he was a really great guy. And he was super wise. And he looked like a trucker. And he always wore, like, he was a little guy. And he looked like a trucker hat. And he passed last year as well. And he had 40 years. And he was sober. And I miss him every day. You know, I miss him every day. And I would call him and I'd say, what are you doing? And he'd say he had horrific arthritis, and he'd sit in this recliner all day long. And I'd say, what are you doing? And he'd say, I'm watching the tube, or the tube's watching me. I don't know which. And he just was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And he wasn't afraid to say things to me, like when I would complain about being sober, you know, he'd say, well, go drink. If you want to go drink, go drink. He's like, I don't know what to tell you. If you don't see your sobriety as a gift and you can't be grateful for it, then just go drink, because I don't know what else to tell you. He wasn't afraid to tell people the truth, and he wasn't afraid to be a little tough loving on people, you know? And I'm so grateful that he was for me, you know? So he started getting sick, and I switched up all of my meetings, and I was going to candlelights. And so I think that was when, the tail end of, I don't know when that would have been. But anyway, I was going to a lot of candlelights, and I found a man at the candlelight. So what am I on now? 5 sponsors? I think I've had 6 or 7. We'll go back in just a second. But anyway, so I was going to these candlelights, and I got a new sponsor, and he was a guy that I met. And he had less time than I did. It doesn't really matter, supposedly. I will say that I think that it made a little bit of a difference to our relationship, and I don't think it was on my end. I think it might have been on his, that he struggled a little bit giving me suggestions and giving me advice. What happened in our relationship was that I had witnessed for many, many years at this point, men that I knew in the program golfing with their sponsors, or doing double dates with their wives, or going out to lunch, or traveling together for conferences. And I knew all the girls that I knew in recovery, that they would go out to lunch or go shopping or go on trips and, whatever. And that wasn't my case. I never had that. I never had that relationship with a sponsor. And, I thought, I'm in this for the long haul. I want to be sponsorable. I want to have a sponsor for the rest of my life. I want somebody that's going to be there for me. And so I just happened to be sitting in a speaker meeting one Sunday night when a friend of mine, we weren't super close, but I knew her through several people. She spoke at this meeting that was my Sunday night candlelight meeting. And she came in and she started speaking. Actually, you know what? She hasn't been my sponsor for 7 or 8 years. I think it's been more like 5 years, 4 or 5 years. And she came in and she started speaking, and she was talking about counseling. And she said something to the effect of, anyway, I really needed to hear what she had to say. And she also talked about the importance of remaining sponsorable. There's 2 things that she said that were really important to me. She said, it's important to remain sponsorable no matter how much time you have. And this is, okay, she has a year less than me, but it doesn't really matter. I think she works 10 times harder than I do in recovery. I mean, she really does. She's doing inventories all the time and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, so she said that about the importance of being sponsorable. And it was something I had really never heard before in the 12-step program, this idea of being sponsorable. And what that means is that you're always in a position where you will have a sponsor and that you are teachable. It's kind of the idea of remaining teachable. No matter if you have 40 or 50 years, the people that I know that have what I want in recovery, even if they have, I just saw a friend of mine get 40 years the other day, 42 years, and he has a sponsor, and that's amazing to me. It's like, okay, I have room for growth, And the other thing that she shared, which I don't know if she would remember this, she shared it with me later too, was you can't pick your agnosticism. And basically what that means is that, and at this point in my life, I really needed to hear that, which means if you're a person that believes in a higher power, you can't say, okay, I believe that God is in it for this, but not for this. Like, okay, I have faith in God for this. Like, I have faith that God is, you know, I trust God in this relationship situation, but I don't trust God in this, right? Like, you can't pick your agnosticism. Like, you either are all in or all out. You know, God either is or he isn't. And she said that, and I, like, it just was like, boom, like, I needed to hear that. So, I can remember, like, going to my counselor or going to my therapist and asking him what he thought about having a female sponsor. I asked a couple different people. And my therapist was like, I mean, you've really done it the way that you were supposed to do it, and you've tried it, and if it doesn't work, try something different. And so I asked her, and she said, I need to run it by my sponsor first. Let me, you know, call you back and let you know. And she called me back the next day, and she said, let's get together for dinner, and let's meet, and, you know, whatever. And we did. We met at Charleston's, and we were sharing stories about stuff, and I started talking about something. I don't even know what it was. It was actually pretty minuscule. And so I kind of joke about my sponsor. She's kind of like a real housewife that is also kind of like a super spy. Like, she could climb over a wall in heels like nobody's business, okay? And has, let me just tell you, in boots that have heels on it, she's climbed over walls and things like that to help people and get into their houses. I mean, she is, when you hear the stories, I mean, this woman has gone to many lengths for sobriety. And she just lost one of her greatest friends just a couple days ago, and I feel just so... She's just a beacon of hope when it comes to recovery. But anyway, you know, she's always got some huge purse or whatever. And so we're sitting there at Charleston's, and I'm eating my grilled cheese sandwich or whatever, you know, and wherever we go, no matter what time of day, she's always drinking a cup of coffee. So she had a cup of coffee, and she's drinking this cup of coffee. It's like 11 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night or something. And I brought up something, and it was just like real minuscule, and she starts getting into her purse, and I thought, she isn't even paying attention to me. And she starts rifling through her purse, and she brings out these papers and these pens, and she like kind of throws them at me. And I said, what's this? And she said, well, we're going to inventory this right now. And I said, what? I'm eating my dinner right now. She said, no, we're going to inventory this right now. She said, I want you to talk about what your resentment is related to this issue. I said, you want me to write this down right now? She goes, yeah, you need to see it on paper. You need to see it on paper. And then we're going to work it through. We're going to work at, you know, on how this affected you, what's your part in that, you know, on and on and on. And so I said, oh, I'm not really in the mood to do this tonight. Like, I'm just kind of sitting here eating it. And she looked at me and she said, are you telling me no? Just because if you're telling me no, this relationship's not going to work. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll do this. And so we did this inventory. And I just felt, I left there and I felt lighter. I felt fantastic, you know? There has been so many things that have happened in the time that she has been my sponsor, that she has walked me through. You know, I talked about this in my video when I came back, but like, I know a lot of people know that with my back pain and things like that, I mean, she really worked with my husband and the doctors. On all of that, you know, about, well, that was like, you know, 2 years ago, and on my fear of getting hooked on, you know, back pain medication and things like that. And she's just been phenomenal. I mean, she was, you know, by my side, you know, through everything that I've gone through, and, you know, just recently gave me my 28-year coin and said beautiful things. And I wouldn't say that we're the best friends in the entire world. I would say that we're friends. I love her company. We sit and talk on the phone and joke and laugh, and, you know, and she's got a great spirit about her, and she's always redoing something in her house, and she inspires me and she motivates me. And one of the things that I love about her is that she's passionate. She's passionate about life, and she is so grateful for the gift of recovery. And those are the sponsors that I've had. And, you know, I will say this. I don't have anything bad to say about any of the sponsors that I've had. You know, I think that each sponsor that I've had has brought me to the point where the next person picked up and taught me what I needed to know at that point. So how many sponsors have I had? Let's see. I had my first one in treatment, okay, and then I know their names, but I don't want to say their names, and then that, and then that, and then that, and then that, and then that. So I've had 6 sponsors total in my sobriety, and each one has just taught me unbelievably miraculous things that have brought me to where I am today, and I'm so grateful for it. I understand the fear of wanting to ask somebody for help. You know, we talk about this 400-pound phone in recovery. I understand the fear of picking up the phone and calling somebody and saying, will you sponsor me? How tough that is. I understand how tough it is to go up to somebody at a meeting and say, will you sponsor me? Or will you help me? And if it makes it easier for you, ask them, just, will you work steps with me? You know, that you don't have to ask them to sponsor you. Maybe that's too much of a commitment. I don't love the phrase temporary sponsor, which we kind of throw around a lot in recovery. I think it's an easier way of having to have a commitment with somebody. But what you can ask somebody is, will you work steps with me? You know, that doesn't have to, anybody can work steps with you. They don't have to be your sponsor, you know. It doesn't talk a lot about it doesn't talk at all about sponsorship, you know, in most of the text. And it's just a suggestion. I don't know how I would have worked steps without a sponsor, you know. And I will say this. Find a sponsor that really knows how to work steps. My sponsor that I have today, she works the steps every year on her own. She also does workshops. She's very educated on the steps. She knows what she's talking about. I have had sponsors that don't know as much as her, and I will say that that does make a difference, you know? And she is somebody that says, if I'm going to sponsor you, every year we're going to do an inventory together. We're going to clear the wreckage of the past, get it cleared out so that you can feel good about yourself and move on. And I think that that is what I needed, you know? And I hope that she's my sponsor for the rest of my life. So anyway, that's my experience with sponsorship. I hope that helped a little bit. Feel free to share your experience in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.